Hello everyone, this is day 2 of Maintainers and Community track. My name is Inessa Pawson, I'm a co-chair of this track. We have Yuvi from MyBinder and Y2C talking about MyBinder. The talk is titled Towards a More Sustainable and Reliable MyBinder.org. Yuvi, please take it away.
Thank you. I am one of the many co-creators of mybinder.org. I also do a bunch of other things in the Jupyter Hub ecosystem, and we're going to talk about mybinder.org. So what is mybinder.org? I think this is sort of like a cozy audience. I feel like you all probably know, but I will show it because that I think is easier using one of my most favorite examples, which is the LIGO event, which is the gravitational wave stuff that got the Nobel Prize, and the LIGO people, run a tutorial so that you can play with their data and reproduce their results, and they made it available through their website in a number of ways. So one way is you have a Linux or Mac computer, know how to use Conda, know how to use Git, and know how to run things in the command line, and then you can do all of that yourself. Or you have Windows, and then you're kind of screwed, right? It's like basically then like install Linux and then go from there. Or you can use Colab and do a bunch of stuff in there that again, proprietary service, it has its own set of problems we'll come to later. Or you can use Binder. So there, if I go back to the repository, you can see that they have their code and their environment and a little bit of their data, and then I can click Launch Binder. This may be familiar to some of you, and sometimes it just spins and spins and ends with tears, or doesn't end. It's just you're like, I guess I'm not using this today, and that's the reliability problems that you'll acknowledge and deal with and talk about as like a part of this. Right, you may notice that this looks slightly prettier because we have a new UI, but this is just me stalling as this thing launches, right? Because it is reproduced this in the sense of it has reproduced the environment, right? It's already built the Conda package and everything, and set this up. In Angus's talk earlier, he was just like, never use MyBinder in like a live demo, which is very fair for the last few years, but I want to see that this has actually gotten better. I can use MyBinder on my live demo, and so did he, and it worked out okay. So if you look at this, right, like this has the environment, the package is installed, the code, the data, and you can like sort of like follow along here to like do what you need to do and see the results. And the important thing here is that like you click the link, right? Like that's the experience that you had. You didn't even need to know Conda, right? Like what you were interested in was gravitational waves, and you can follow that interest. So this is removing the accidental complexity of everything that needed to work, right? Like gravitational waves are complex by themselves, right? Like there's essential complexity in there. So this lets you deal with that. So I think of MyBinder as a way to reduce the accidental complexity of packaging, of distribution, of all of that, so people can focus on the essential complexity of what you're trying to communicate, as well as what they're trying to learn. In the past, we've really thought of this as something for Jupyter notebooks, but that's not true. You can basically run any interactive web app, RStudio, VS Code, all sorts of things. I love doing random Linux desktops as sort of like my demo, because it's kind of like really strange how far we have come in like putting things inside things, so that so this is like a web browser that's like connecting to a server that's running something Linux that's gonna inside it run a different Linux that's gonna pretend to be like Windows XP, which I generally think is like really cool. And the fact I can just run this in my browser from clicking a link and then like stalling for the amount it takes to install Windows XP, which is much faster. I've installed Windows XP. It takes a lot longer than this does. So, and you can also see it's already pre-built because I've been doing this before. So this is just like fetching the image and then running it. But most importantly, even though I am stalling, I feel fairly confident that this would work, which I wouldn't have done last SciPy. right? And I wouldn't have recommended you do last SciPy. And so I'm very proud of the work that the team of volunteers and everyone has done from a sustainability and technical perspective to like get us to where we are. So yeah, this is on. Now it's just waiting for Windows XP to load. Who knows how long it'll take. I'm going to move on. But it launched. Oh! We are here. So it is fully interactive, but I'm so tempted because it's such a good demo, right? We've gotten so close. Now it's just the internet taking a while for these things to load. But we'll come back to it. Okay. We've had 35 million launches since 2018. I think that is a huge number, and I'm really, really happy about that. And you can look at the graph of launches. You can see there is a lot of growth, and then around 2022 December, which is when whoever was helping us at Google Cloud get free credits, I don't know what happened to them. I hope they're doing okay. Like internal reshuffling, one supposes, and then we were not able to get credits, and then we moved some of the major ways that in which you can try Jupyter interfaces off of Binder into Jupyter Lite, and so you can see the drop in traffic there. But then it's been consistent since. We get about 200,000 launches every month now on a fairly consistent basis. I think that's still excellent, for like the kind of service this is. And my hope is that as we get more reliable, and as we get more demonstrably reliable, right? Like then more and more people will feel comfortable using this, right? Because trust has to be regained, no matter what kind of a project you are, right? Like understand it's a volunteer-driven project, but you need to use it, so it needs to be usable. And so over a period of time, I hope we will regain trust. And then if I give this talk again next year, that I'm not like, oh, that's not so bad. That's just like flat. But you can see until then, it's going up and up and up. And you can see that's also like, from my perspective, a major reason is like, right, we need to do better on the sustainability angle, not the technical angle. So I'll talk about what we've done there. So what is open infrastructure? This is sort of like the core of what I think is important about my binder. So that is Windows 95. It's shrink wrapped in the literal sense of the word. It's a shrink wrapped package that you physically go to a store, buy, come home, install it, and then use it. And this required you to have a certain amount of expertise in how computers work to do so. And I would think of old school. I guess it's old school now, like open source software or free software, sort of like, this is like a broad generalization. Everyone's going to hate me for this, but that's what is like the response to that, right? Like instead of going to a store, buying something, coming back home, installing it and using it, you can get one of these CDs online or like go to a user group meeting and get that. Or you can still go to the store, pay money and buy Red Hat Linux. But the more important difference is that if you want Windows 95 to do something different, you kind of like go join Microsoft, grind your way up the ranks, and by the time you get to a position of power where you can make choices like that, you have forgotten what you actually wanted to change, right? Because you have had to do so much and become kind of a different person that you are like, oh, I just wanted the start button to be a different color. Just doesn't really hit anymore, right? But you can do that with like free software. Like the people who use it are the people who build and control it, and that's what really matters there. But now that's not how we install or use software for the most part, right? Software as a service is where things are today. You go to Gmail. You do not download and install a email client. You go to the App Store, right? Like you read on like Kindle, and I'm sure there's a million other things, but I think there's this conflation of software as a service as a delivery mechanism, and like large multi-billion-dollar companies or VC-funded startups. These are fully orthogonal, right? Like, and you can see there's a lot of these kind of services that are software as a service, but we don't think of them as such. Wikipedia is software as a service. Like you don't have to install MediaWiki to use Wikipedia. And Debian kind of is, right? Like app stores, Debian has app repositories. I think Condaforge, Homebrew, all of them sort of like come from the same lineage, and that predates app stores by a long time. They have their own policies. It's a different policy, but still. And I see Binder is like in the same vein, and I encourage you to investigate what Anna's archive is. So this is sort of like the distinction between open source software, right, which is something that you can kind of download and install, because Binder Hub, Repo Docker, Jupyter Hub, Kubernetes, Linux kernel, Docker, there's like a million things there. But then when it is all deployed for you in such a way that you can just use it, right, that is an open, community-run, open infrastructure. And I think it matters that it is community-run, and I really like it. I think this is like new. It's, well, relatively new, right? Like Debian's been doing this for a long time. But I think it's really important to decouple the idea of software as a service from like the way that it has been funded for like the last 15 years. There's no reason those two need to be conflated. And you can see this is, we run that out of the repository. You can see this actually has a lot of contributors, right? Like this can be any open source project. And it just happens to run active infrastructure this way. You can see these are all individual changes and commits, either version upgrades, config change, you know, and they can be from lots of people, right? Like again, exactly like an open source project. So you're basically taking the attitude and culture for running an open source project and bringing it to running something that is not a noun, right, but a verb. It's a living thing that continuously changes and like evolves. I will pop here and see, well, Windows XP is whatever it's doing. Anyway, it works. Believe me. So I love this code. This is from, you know, like a response to Marshall McLuhan's like the medium is the massage, which is we shape our tools and thereafter our tools shape us, right? And so to me, this is why it's important to do this. This is why it's important to contribute to open source. It's important why it's to use open source tools, not at personal cost to oneself, right? Like again, you have to have perspective. We don't want to end up in a purity spiral situation, right? That doesn't help anyone. But it is really important for us to see that the tools we use definitely shape us. So we have to pay attention to who shapes those tools and what their incentives may be, and sort of try to align our incentives with theirs. And the most obvious common way to do that is for us to shape our tools ourselves, right? Like, and participate in that. You know, you don't need to know everything about Kubernetes to use mybinder.org, but it is important that there is a subset of people who use mybinder.org do know it, right, and then can change it so it fits their user bases. And I think that's really important, especially in this year. I love both of these things. You know, like I feel like I don't know about you, but my experience with technology has basically been degrading, you know, especially over the last, I want to say 8 years, 10 years maybe, where it doesn't feel like a tool that I can use to do the things I want, right? Like I feel like I am a user, a number that is being like shaped into something very specific to meet someone else's goals, and along the way maybe I'll meet some of mine, but that's not why we're here, right? So I think it makes it easier to see, right, like why this sort of like control is more important. And Cory Doctorow has written a lot more about this with a lot more eloquence. I highly recommend looking up, reading, watching, listening, all of that. To that, but that meme to me really captures like the core of the problem here. So yeah, this is, you know, like we're talking about how, yeah, sometimes you just see the spinner, it spins, keeps spinning, and then you just give up and go, right? Like, and that's perfectly valuable as a thing for you to do. You want to actually get your thing done. This is why we avoid going into purity spirals, right? Like you don't want to be like, oh, I cannot use my binder, so I'm just going to not do my science. That's not helpful to anyone, right? So what went there? So first is running infrastructure takes money, right? But this is true for open source projects as well. You know, like SciPy is free to you. SciPy is not free to SciPy. You know, like that costs a ton of money because they have to have the infrastructure that pay for the traffic. It fastly supports them, so that sort of works out. But you, as the end user, don't know that, right? Like to you, it's just like SciPy works because the SciPy team is great at doing what they're doing. And like GitHub is actually also similar, right? Like a GitHub repository to you is free, but that's because Microsoft makes money in lots of other places. I don't know if they make money on GitHub, but they make enough money in enough other products that they can pour money into GitHub, so it's free for you. So when we look at the tools we use for generating open source software, there's enough random things going on that, like, from an end user perspective, it feels free, right? But there's infrastructure always costs money, and that is one big aspect of like all of this. And then, like the way that my binder has been dealing with this for like several years is to have the idea of a my binder federation. So at any time, there's always compute being donated by multiple organizations. These have been the folks who have done this for us in the past. This is the current 2 federation members who have been contributing to this. Jessus has been really great. They're like an institute out of like Europe, and they've been doing amazing work for years and years and now. And 2I2C, which I'm a part of, has been doing this for a little while as well. And so can your organization. We'll talk about this a little bit later. This is part of the sustainability, right? Like, if you remember the graph from earlier, part of the problem when we lost Google's sponsorship is that, well, when you rely on one big sponsor, it's just too fragile, right? Like, and so we're trying to be like, right, it's so much easier to be like, actually, we want to sponsor Binder for like $500 for a year rather than $50,000 for a year, right? And it's much better to have a larger number of smaller organizations doing this kind of support. And that's sort of what we are trying to get towards doing. We'll talk about that in a little bit. The other thing is that it requires different skill sets than just software development, right? The same way, like, using NumPy requires different skill sets from contributing to NumPy, which can be learned, right? Like, there's always a clear pathway. So does running infrastructure. We've been developing software based on how you count it for 80 years, but we've been running internet scale, large scale infrastructure in this fashion for maybe 30. So it's a fairly new field, right? And so there's just fewer people doing it. There isn't like, I don't think there is a web scale operations course you can really take anywhere, right? It's all just like School of Hard Knocks. So it is a different skill set that just fewer people have, and that makes it more difficult, and conversely makes it more important for us to build the capacity in the communities and organizations we are part of. So let me talk quickly about the new developments that have made this easier. So one is, when we started this, we did a lot of work on Kubernetes, which is very cloud agnostic. The idea is, instead of just doing something that's specific to Amazon or Google, which is what they want you to do, we do a little bit of extra work in making sure that things can run anywhere. And that has paid out really well. This is sort of the cost to compute of some of the various cloud providers. And you can see we're using something called Hetzner, which is a really old, like 30, 40 plus years, old school cloud provider, data center provider. And compute there is not like a percentage cheaper. It's an order of magnitude cheaper. It's a multiplier cheaper, right, than like Google or whoever. And we could very easily move off the managed cloud providers onto running Kubernetes on this, because the Kubernetes project has also matured, right? Like when Binder started in 2018, Kubernetes had not been matured as much. We needed to pay the additional tax of the major cloud providers so they could run Kubernetes for us. We no longer need to do that. The K3S project has worked very well, and all of my Binder is now just served by 2 VMs that run an independent entity of Kubernetes each, and you can see that it is just so much cheaper to be able to do so, right? And that really helps. And so we currently serve 200,000 launches for a total of about $1,000 in cloud cost. This is pretty cheap. We are only at about 40% capacity, so that means we can go close to 500 million launches without adding more capacity. And the flip side of that, it means that we can just cut our capacity in half and pay only $500 a month, right? So this has been really, really great. And this is also, again, like makes it easier to get more people on, right? Like, because we can just be like, great, there is such a big difference between like, give us a server and give us a Kubernetes cluster, right? Like now we're just like, great, you're a university, you have an old server sitting in a data center somewhere, fine, we'll just add it, right? Like compared to like, right, you're a university now, you have to like get approval to set up a Kubernetes cluster and then like do all of this work. So there's an order of magnitude jump. I think wherever there's order of magnitude jumps, both in terms of like reduction of cost and reduction of complexity, it makes things go much better, right? So hopefully next time I come and give this talk, we have more Federation members and more users because they can trust that when they need to use my binder, it will actually work. So there's also a bunch of other stuff going on in Jessis. Arnim, who's someone at Jessis, has been supporting us throughout for a long time. And 2i2c has been doing this. NASA Veda is a wonderful project that is also helping putting cycles into this through development seed. We rewrote the front end. This is a comment I had written when I first started the front end for the Binder Hub project, and it said, you know, like, once it crosses 200 lines, just write it using a framework. But it was like about 6,000 lines of extremely messy code before we could finish actually rewriting it. But now it is a modern JavaScript front-end framework that I feel like anyone who wants to contribute JavaScript to can, which is not the case before, right? Like, so if you're annoyed by how my binder does something, it's so much easier to actually fix it because it's not some arcane thing, but like just standard web development stuff, right? And this is done thanks to, again, effort from Jessis, from NASA Veda project, as well as development seed. And we're also working on more deeply integrating this with Jupyter Hub. So there is a Jupyter Fancy Profiles project that basically lets you, once you log into the Jupyter Hub, you can provide it. So instead of admins having to build images and environments for you and maintain it, and then you be frustrated with like, but I need this package, I can't get it. You can simply, in the same way as you use on my binder, create a Git repository, just put your environment.yaml file in it, and then plop that in your Jupyter Hub, and it'll automatically build the image. And again, this goes back to like removing accidental complexity. You don't really need to know anything about Kubernetes or config files or YAML or anything. You just like, I have an environment YAML file, and now it's running on my Jupyter Hub. So check out the Jupyter Fancy Profiles project if you're interested in that. And this is how we were able to get co-investment from the NASA Veda project, right? Because they want that. And then we were like, great, we can add that to the Binder Hub project because it already does all of that. We just need the API and get better to be able to use it, right? So that has helped us bring more people and time and effort into this. And that's made the project more robust and better. So yeah, what can you do to help? I love this slide from Katie Huff's talk yesterday. And I think it applies to my binder too, right? Like if you use it, you can help make it better. And that is sort of the point of it being open infrastructure, right? And then what are the various ways? So one is just use it, right? And report bugs. I think for projects, there's always a fall off when at some point you like, all right, I'm going to use this, there's a bug, I'm going to report it. And then at some point you're like, I'm going to use this, there's a bug, this is just so sad, I'm just going to give up and move on because, you know, like, I don't think reporting this bug will do anything. It's possible that for some of you, my binder had crossed that in the past. I encourage you to give it another shot. Like this is a screenshot of someone reporting a bug, right? And then we worked back and forth on the Jupyter Zulip, and then the bug was fixed for everyone, right? And not just for this person. It was fixed for everyone who was using Dataverse in a specific circumstance, right? So just use it and report bugs. And it may take some time, right? Volunteer-driven projects and all of that, but report bugs. The Jupyter Zulip is a very good place to do this kind of stuff. Contribute to the open source components, right? This is just your standard, like, right, I want to learn more how to do React stuff. Great, now you can go work on the front end. I want to learn how to do more Docker stuff. Great, you can do things in repo Docker. I want to do more Kubernetes. You can do Binder Hub. This is just like stuff you can do. This is like standard, you know, work on more open source projects. They will solve all your problems. You don't need to do anything else. Things. Join the MyBinder Federation. See, that's sort of like the pricing that we currently pay on Hetzner, and you can see, again, that is just so much cheaper, right? It feels like if you are to make a case to management and then be like, you need to sponsor them, it's about $25,000 a year. That's such a fundamentally different thing. Then be like, yeah, we want to sponsor them. We can do like $900 a year, right? Like, and that adds like enough capacity that it matters. Like you remove that 1 0 from there, and it makes like, such a huge difference, right? So you or your organization can join the federation for a period of time. It doesn't need to be Hetzner, right? It can be anywhere. Maybe you have a bunch of credits that you're not using. Or maybe you have a server that's just sitting somewhere because it's not being used for whatever reason, right? Like, so there's a lot of ways in which you can like add compute to this, and then you're welcome to do so. Again, the Zulip, or you can also, of course, reach out to me, contribute to the running of the infrastructure itself, right? Like this is, I learned a lot of my like knowledge/skills by doing this at Wikimedia, right? Like Wikipedia is running at huge scale. There is a lot of joy that can be had from being like, oh, I did this thing and it affected 5 million people positively, because Wikipedia scale is huge, right? My binder scale is smaller, but it still does affect people positively. And it does so in a more immediate fashion almost than contributing to open source software. The software, it's like released and then someone uses it sometime and then it's like that. While infrastructure is like, oh, we just did this and now it's deployed. And then you click the link and it's going to look different, right? So the feedback cycle is a little bit more instant. And so that may be a really good thing for you all to try to do. Or, just hang out at the Jupyter Zulip. Ultimately, I think communities are not artifacts, but just the people who make them up. And the more people there are, the better the community is, right? So you don't actually have to do anything necessarily, but hang out there, say hi to people, and then just, be a part of the conversation. And I think that itself is more than enough. So that's all I got. Thank you for coming here. And, I have 2 asks. If you have given up on my binder, try again, right? And then we'll see where that goes. The second ask is, if you recognize the reference on my t-shirt, please come talk to me afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Yuvi. Now it's time for questions, and just a reminder that we're taking all questions through the Slack channel. There is a dedicated thread that has Yuvi's name and the title of his talk. And if you like a question you see, give thumbs up or another positive energy emoji.
So I swear I didn't rig this, but the first question is from Matt. How difficult is it now to spin up your own Binder Hub server?
Great question. So it has gotten easier to spin up your own Binder Hub instance for your institution as well. The hope is for us to make an official release of Binder Hub within, I want to say, the next 3 to 6 months, and then things should get better from there. If you're interested in, and the more there are people interested in setting up their own Binder Hubs, the faster this work is going to happen. So if you're interested in doing so, please show up at the Zulip and say so, and that will help us prioritize this kind of work better.
And question from Tetsu. I miss the days when we could use my binder during the SciPy tutorials. How realistic is it to expect that it could be brought back with enough resources?
I think it is very realistic. I would love for us to be able to use it for the SciPy tutorials next year. I think, for example, right, like if you're like, right, we need it for another 200 people. I'm like, great, let's just provision another Hetzner box. That, like, one Hetzner box that we have currently can serve 400 people. Right? So we're like, we just add excess capacity, this should be fine. So I would love to use it for like a SciPy tutorial. And like trust once lost has to be regained slowly, right? So I would also love for us to regain that slowly by, if you have a tutorial that you're giving somewhere, 30 people, 50 people, right? Reach out on the Jupyter Zulip and we'll get that to work there, and then so we can progressively overload, right? And incrementally keep getting that better. So I would love to for us to bring that back.
And a question from Lauren. Is there a way that crowdsourced volunteer resources could possibly be used to address the infrastructure difficulties?
Yeah, so there is the concept of federation, right? Like Mastodon, if you're used to it, also has this. And I think what we are doing is moving away from like, oh, the resources in my laptop, and then I'm going to manage that, right? Or like I'm going to contribute that to like slightly one level up, where you're like, right, the resources from my organization, and maybe the organization is just you, it's fine. But the idea with federation is that it's just a little bit more structured, so it's less like SETI or like run this on your laptop, but and more like, right, like contribute a server. So I do believe, because this is not a new model, like, if you know how like Debian used to distribute its like images, it's like all mirrors, right? Like, so people will be like, oh, we have some capacity, let's contribute, mirrors to this. So there is a lot of precedent for like these kind of things working for decades, and I think we can keep doing that.
All right, let's thank Yuvi again.
Windows XP. All right. Thank you.
Is that a miter?
Yeah.